Money, money, money. It makes the world go around. That's some kind of saying or something like that. But when it comes to fantasy world building, the common tropes are using gold, silver and copper coins. But what if you want to dig a bit deeper with your economic system? That's what we're going to explore here today. Let's get into it. Hi guys, my name is Jesper and welcome to the Fane of Fantasy. This channel is all about giving you inspiration to master your craft and create fantasy that will truly immerse your audience. Economics and coins is not something that I have worried a ton about in the past, I must admit, when I've been creating my own settings. But I also have to say that a coin called Bright Eagle or something like that, it's kind of cool. It just gives that extra little piece of flavor, doesn't it? In a fantasy world, the coins might have an avatar of the gods depicted on them, similar to how many nations dating back to the Roman era have faces on their coins. These are also the option of playing with different shapes and make your coins oval, squares or whatever you might want. That is at least one of the ways in making a difference when it comes to coins, and that only takes a minute to do. If you can come up with a reason for why the coins look differently, well, then that's all the better. However, I would say that you should consider if commons in general has any significant role to play in front of your audience, because if it does, then let's dig a bit deeper, because scarcity really matters here. In the past, I have on several occasions mentioned how it's important to consider who has access to which type of resources in your setting. And the same thing applies when you're creating maps of your world, by the way, but here I'm more thinking of how the value of coins are often based on precious metals. So goods are exchanged against the value of coins, and that value is determined by how rare the metal are, which the coins are being minted from. So this is why I said that it matters who has access to which sort of material, because nations who has lots and lots of precious metal basically controls commerce. They can release more coins into the market, which will devalue the currency, or they can make it harder to come by these coins and basically increase the perceived value of them. It's all about supply and demand, really. If in your setting you do have a single or a group of countries who control supply and demand to such a degree that I just mentioned, I bet you will also find wars. Other nations will without a doubt want to rid themselves of this sort of iron fist around the economics of the world and maybe attack them. Or think of the Iron Bank in Game of Thrones as an example. Those guys are playing it smart and doesn't get directly involved in all the warring, but they rather play each ruler out against each other and then maintain their control from behind the scenes. It's a pretty nice situation to be in, I guess, at least as long as you can walk that fine balance. It's a dangerous game to play and therefore also gives you lots and lots of story hooks. One of the simplest ways of doing something different with your currency is simply to make, say, copper more valuable than gold. But perhaps a bit more creativity would be if the currency in your world was something organic, maybe. So perhaps some kind of seaweed that grows very deep in the ocean. Well, in such a case, you do need to come up with a reason as to why people would value this sort of seaweed and use it as a currency. But perhaps it has some kind of special properties that heals people, or perhaps it's the only true form of nourishment that you can get in your particular world. I don't know what it is, but it's a matter of coming up with something that actually makes sense. I believe that the video game Fallout uses bottle caps as a currency, just as an example of something differently here. So also consider how coins from a different nation might be outright rejected, or perhaps seen as having much less value if the countries have been at war with one another for the past centuries. This is where a new role could be added to your fantasy world as well, because a profession of people actually exchanging money could come into existence because of this. Again, it should matter somehow though. So best if it relates to the story that you are having this kind of exchange person. But even if not, it could still serve as a bit of a spice on top. That little thing just creates immersion, and that's all great in itself. A word of caution though, there are thieves and con men around, and they exist in your fantasy world too, whether you know it or not. This is important because if you do decide to use something other than precious metals as your currency, give a bit of thought as to how easy your alternative can be to counterfeit. If someone can decrease the actual cost of living by cheating the system, they probably will do so. When dealing with currency, it's hard to avoid the topic of trading. If a nation has a monopoly on one type of resource, they will probably be in lack of something else. So countries trade with one another, and in doing so, supply and demand can once again play a role in your world. It can be very profitable to move goods from one place where the supply is high to another place where the supply is low. The further you are willing to travel, well, the greater the profit, perhaps even the greater risk. So because of economics, you will have trade routes that moves goods around. I mentioned the Silk Road in a previous video. I think it was the video where I talked about the griffin, but never mind that for now. As before, such roads or even companies dealing in trade can play a significant role in your setting. They are also targets, right? Whoever controls trade controls politics and can therefore improve significantly on their own lives. This is the sort of thing people will fight over. Well, that was a few things to consider around coins and currency, but I would be very curious to know if you have invented or come across any truly unique takes on economics in a fantasy setting. Just let me know in the comments section below. Please, that would be very interesting. Otherwise, I want to remind you, if this is your first time here, do make sure to subscribe and learn to master the craft of creating immersing fantasy worlds, settings and characters. I share new videos every single Monday, and hey, don't forget to follow along on social media. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.